Hello there, and thank you for tuning in again for another report. This is Company Intelligence Report 2016, number 95. The report does not have the usual confidential sensitive at the top. This has a title, Russia/US Presidential Election, Further Indications of Extensive Conspiracy Between Trump's Campaign Team and the Kremlin. The report is undated, and it seems that maybe the final page of the report is missing. Normally the date would be placed on the last page of a report, and this has no date, and it looks as though part of a page at least is missing. I don't know why that would be, whether it has been censored, whether there were security reasons for it being left out, or whether it was accidentally omitted. But this report seems to be, to my opinion, it seems to be incomplete. Summary. Further evidence of extensive conspiracy between Trump's campaign team and Kremlin, sanctioned at highest levels and involving Russian diplomatic staff based in the United States. So you see this is getting very sensitive. Trump associate admits Kremlin behind recent appearance of DNC emails on WikiLeaks as means of maintaining plausible deniability. That is, plausible deniability for Putin. Agreed exchange of information established in both directions. Trump's team using moles within the DNC and hackers in the United States, as well as outside in Russia. Putin motivated by fear and hatred of Hillary Clinton. Russians receiving intel from Trump's team on Russian oligarchs and their families in the United States. I should mention, I have been finding lots of evidence that during the 80s and 90s, Trump was engaged with many of these Russian oligarchs and some of the Russian mobs in his construction projects in the United States. So that is possibly where this particular information derives ultimately from. Mechanisms for transmitting this intelligence involves, quote, pension disbursements to Russian immigrants living in the United States as cover, using consular officials in New York, District of Columbia, and Miami. Suggestion from source close to Trump and Manafort that Republican campaign team happy to have Russia as media boogeyman to mask more extensive corrupt business ties to China and other emerging countries. Now that's Paul Manafort that's mentioned, and we will see that he is being investigated at this minute by a congressional committee for his Russian ties and perhaps criminal activities. Now the detail. 1. Speaking in confidence to a compatriot in late July of 2016, source E, an ethnic Russian close associate of Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump, not sure who that is, source E, an ethnic Russian close associate of Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump, admitted that there was a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between them and the Russian leadership. This was managed on the Trump side by the Republican candidate's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was using foreign policy advisor Carter Page. Carter Page is also under investigation for possible criminal activities at this moment. Carter Page and others as intermediaries. The two sides had a mutual interest in defeating Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, whom President Putin apparently both hated and feared. 2. Inter alia, source E acknowledged that the Russian regime had been behind the recent leak of embarrassing email messages emanating from the Democratic National Committee, DNC, to the WikiLeaks platform. The reason for using WikiLeaks was, quote, plausible deniability, and the operation had been conducted with the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. In return, the Trump team had agreed to sideline Russian intervention in Ukraine as a campaign issue and to raise U.S. NATO defense commitments in the Baltics and Eastern Europe to deflect attention away from Ukraine, a priority for Putin, who needed to cauterize the subject. And of course, we've been seeing a lot of rhetoric from Trump about getting NATO to pull its own weight financially and so forth, and really a lot of stuff that has our NATO partners and allies greatly alarmed at the moment while I'm speaking. 3. In the wider context of Trump campaign Kremlin cooperation, Source E, again this is a Russian close to Trump, Source E claimed that the intelligence network being used against Clinton comprised 3 elements. Firstly, there were agents, facilitators within the Democratic Party structure itself. Secondly, Russian émigrés and associated offensive cyber operators based in the United States. And thirdly, state-sponsored cyber operatives working in Russia. All 3 elements had played an important role to date. On the mechanism for rewarding relevant assets based in the United States and affecting a two-way flow of intelligence and other useful information, Source E claimed that Russian diplomatic staff in key cities such as New York, Washington, D.C., and Miami were using the émigré so-called pension distribution system as cover. The operation therefore depended on key people in U.S.-Russian émigré community for its success. Tens of thousands of dollars were involved. 4. In terms of the intelligence flow from the Trump team to Russia, Source E reported that much of this concerned the activities of business oligarchs and their families' activities and assets in the United States, with which Putin and the Kremlin seemed preoccupied. In other words, these billionaire Russians in the United States, Putin is worried about their loyalty and whether they are perhaps operating independently of him. And so, according to this report, Trump and his henchmen have been reporting back to Putin on what these Russian oligarchs, some of whom have been doing business with Trump, what they are doing, whether they are loyal to Trump, to Putin or not. At least that's my take on what this is all about. 5. Commenting on the negative media publicity surrounding alleged Russian interference in the United States election campaign in support of Trump, Source E said he understood, here it says he, so that's, whether that's a slip, I don't know. Normally it says she or he, but here it comes out and says Source E is a he, understood that the Republican candidate and his team were relatively relaxed about this because it deflected media and the Democrats' attention away from Trump's business dealings in China and other emerging markets. Unlike in Russia, these were substantial and included the payment of large bribes and kickbacks, which, were they to become public, would be potentially very damaging to their campaign, that is, Trump's campaign. 6. Finally, regarding Trump's claimed minimal investment profile in Russia, a separate source with direct knowledge said this had not been for want of trying. Trump's previous efforts had included exploring the real estate sector in St. Petersburg as well as Moscow, but in the end, Trump had had to settle for the use of extensive sexual services there from local prostitutes rather than business success. And this is where the report ends without a date, and I suspect that there may have been a so-called company comment at the end, but that's mere speculation. So that's the end of this report. And this, of course, is pretty damaging if it is true, because it really gives a lot of information on how the Russians helped to get Trump elected. That's all for this report. I hope you will tune in to my next report. Thank you for watching.